Imagine you're on the open ocean. A thick, unnatural fog rolls in, swallowing the horizon and muffling the sound of the waves. The air grows cold, so cold it bites at your skin. And then you see it. A silhouette against the gray mist. An old ship, a 17th century galleon, with tattered sails glowing with a sickly phantom light. It's moving impossibly fast, sailing directly against the wind. As it draws closer, you see figures on the deck. A skeletal crew, their movements stiff and eternal, their eyes hollow sockets of despair. They seem to be trying to hand you letters for loved ones they will never see again, people who have been dead for centuries. This is the Flying Dutchman. And if you've seen it, it's already too late. Because to witness this ghost ship is to receive your own death warrant. Every sailor knows the legend. See the Dutchman, and your ship is doomed to be wrecked upon the rocks, dragged to the bottom of the sea. It's a terrifying omen, a specter of the deep that has haunted mariners for over 400 years. But what if the story you think you know is just the surface? What if the tale of a cursed captain is far darker and far more complex than a simple ghost story? What if the captain's blasphemous vow wasn't just an act of defiance, but a calculated pact with a power older than the sea itself? And what if the secret to breaking his eternal curse is not just a myth, but a very real, almost impossible condition that has been waiting to be met for centuries? The legend we all know is just the beginning. The truth is what will keep you awake at night. To understand how a man could become so arrogant, so utterly defiant that he would challenge God and fate, you have to understand the world that created him. We have to go back to the 17th century, the Dutch Golden Age. This wasn't just a period of pretty paintings and windmills. It was an era of explosive wealth, ruthless ambition, and global domination, all powered by one entity: the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC. The VOC was more than just a company. It was a global empire. It had its own army, its own navy, it could mint its own currency, and it could declare war. It was the world's first multinational corporation, and it was fantastically, obscenely wealthy. Its value, adjusted for inflation, would dwarf Apple, Google, and Amazon combined. This wealth was built on the spice trade. Cloves, nutmeg, and pepper were worth more than their weight in gold. And the VOC held a brutal monopoly on them. To maintain this monopoly, their ships had to perform one of the most treacherous sea voyages ever known to man. The journey from the Netherlands down the coast of Africa, around the continent's southern tip, and across the vast, violent Indian Ocean to the Spice Islands of Indonesia. And the deadliest part of this entire journey was a single terrifying choke point: the Cape of Good Hope. The Portuguese sailors who first discovered it didn't call it that. They called it Cabo das Tormentas, the Cape of Storms. And for good reason. This is where the cold Atlantic and the warm Indian Ocean collide in a perpetual war of currents and weather. The waves here are monstrous, rogue behemoths that can rise up without warning and snap a ship's mast like a twig. The winds are hurricane force, capable of shredding sails to ribbons in seconds. The coastline is a graveyard of jagged rocks and hidden reefs. For sailors of the 17th century, in their wooden ships powered only by wind and courage, rounding the Cape of Storms was like playing Russian roulette with the ocean. Hundreds of ships and thousands of men were lost to its fury. It was a place where fortunes were made and lives were shattered. Into this world of high stakes and mortal danger steps our captain. While his name varies in the telling of the tale, the most enduring version calls him Hendrik van der Decken. Van der Decken was not just any captain. He was a legend in his own right. A master mariner, the finest seaman in the entire VOC fleet. He was a man forged from the harsh realities of the sea. He was said to be able to navigate by instinct, to feel the shifts in the weather before any barometer could predict them. His voyages were faster, his profits larger, and his resolve harder than any of his contemporaries. But his skill was matched only by his pride. Van der Decken was a man possessed by a relentless, all-consuming ambition. He saw the Cape of Storms not as a place to be feared, but as a rival to be conquered. He had rounded it countless times, each successful passage feeding his arrogance, making him believe he was not just skilled but invincible. He mocked other captains who waited for favorable weather, calling them cowards. He pushed his crew to their breaking point and beyond, his eyes always fixed on the horizon, on the promise of glory and gold that lay in Amsterdam. He was a man who believed the rules of nature, and perhaps even the laws of God, did not apply to him. He was a ticking time bomb of hubris, and on one fateful voyage in 1641, That bomb was about to detonate. The journey from Batavia in the Dutch East Indies had been grueling but profitable. The hold of Van der Decken's ship was bursting with silks, spices, and porcelain, a treasure worth a king's ransom. He was on the return leg of his voyage, and all that stood between him and unimaginable wealth and fame was one final brutal obstacle: the Cape of Storms. He was determined to make the return trip in record time, a feat that would cement his legacy forever. As they approached the Cape, the sky turned a bruised, sickly purple. The sea, once calm, began to churn and boil. The wind shrieked through the rigging like a banshee. This was no ordinary storm. This was the Cape's full, unrestrained fury, a living tempest that seemed hell-bent on swallowing them whole. Mountainous waves crashed over the deck, sweeping men overboard into the churning abyss. The ship's timbers groaned, threatening to splinter and break apart. The crew, hardened sailors who had seen it all, were terrified. They begged their captain, pleaded with him to turn back, to seek shelter in a nearby bay and wait out the storm. To challenge this maelstrom was not bravery, it was suicide. But Hendrik van der Decken was not a man who turned back. He stood on the quarterdeck, drenched and defiant, his face illuminated by flashes of lightning. He laughed at the storm. He cursed his crew for their cowardice. In his mind, this wasn't a force of nature. It was a personal insult, a direct challenge to his will. The more the storm raged, the more his pride hardened into a diamond-sharp point of pure, blasphemous defiance. He lashed himself to the ship's wheel to keep from being washed away, his knuckles white, his eyes burning with a mad fire. He was going to round that cape or die trying. As the storm reached its apocalyptic crescendo, with the ship on the verge of being torn to pieces, Van der Decken screamed into the teeth of the gale. His voice, somehow rising above the roar of the wind and waves, bellowed out an oath that would echo through eternity. He raised a fist to the heavens and declared, "I will round this cape even if I have to sail until Judgment Day." In that moment, something shifted. The storm didn't just feel natural anymore. It felt watchful. According to the legend, a brilliant, blinding light pierced the black clouds, and a figure appeared on the deck. Some say it was an angel of God, offering one last chance at repentance. Others, and this is the more terrifying version, say it was the devil himself, drawn by the scent of a soul so utterly consumed by pride. The entity laid out the terms of the captain's own vow. He had sworn to sail until Judgment Day, and so he would. He would be granted his wish. He would round the cape forever. He would never make port, never know a moment's rest. He and his crew were now specters, doomed to become a permanent part of the storm, a ghostly warning to all who dared to sail those waters. His ship became a phantom vessel, its crew immortal but damned, forever sailing the accursed seas. The curse was sealed. Captain Van der Decken got his wish. He conquered the storm, but in doing so, he lost his ship, his crew, his life, and his very soul for all eternity. He became the Flying Dutchman. And so the phantom ship was born, not of wood and sail, but of rage and blasphemy. The Dutchman didn't just sail on. It was reborn in the eye of the storm, a spectral echo of the vessel it once was. The very timbers of the ship groaned, no longer with the strain of the sea, but with the agony of 1,000 damned souls. The sails, once white canvas, became tattered shrouds, glowing with a sickly phosphorescent light, an eerie green or a blood red that could be seen for miles, even through the thickest fog. This unholy glow became its calling card, a beacon of despair for all who sailed the southern seas. The crew, once living, breathing men with families and futures, were now prisoners of their captain's pride. They were bound to the ship, their forms flickering between flesh and mist. They are forever caught in a loop, forced to perform their duties for a captain who is no longer a man, but a manifestation of pure, unending fury. They endlessly swab the decks that will never be clean, they mend spectral sails that will never catch a mortal wind, and they climb rigging that leads only to a stormy, godless sky. They are skeletons, gaunt and hollow-eyed, their voices a dry rattle like dead leaves skittering across a tombstone. They are forever cold, forever weary, a silent chorus to their captain's eternal damnation. And the captain himself? Van der Decken stands eternally at the helm, a figure of pure terror. Some say his face is a mask of anguish, his eyes burning like hot coals in the dark. Others claim he has no face at all, just a swirling void beneath his captain's hat. He is forever trying to round the Cape of Good Hope, the very spot of his blasphemy. For eternity, he sails into the teeth of that same phantom storm, battling waves as high as mountains, his ship creaking and groaning, only to be thrown back time and time again. He is locked in his own personal hell, reliving his greatest failure for all time, never to make port, never to find peace. But the curse is more insidious than just endless sailing. It is a curse of eternal, agonizing hope. The damned crew of the Dutchman, in their fleeting moments of lucidity, remember the lives they lost. They remember wives, children, and warm hearts. And in their ghostly torment, they perform one heartbreaking ritual. They write letters. Letters to loved ones who have been dead for centuries. They scribble their desperate messages on scraps of spectral parchment, seal them with phantom wax, and prepare them for delivery. This is the most dangerous part of an encounter with the Flying Dutchman. The phantom ship will often try to hail a living vessel, pulling alongside in an unnatural silence. The ghostly crew will appear at the rails, their skeletal faces pleading, and they will try to lower a bundle of letters, begging the living sailors to take them ashore. They offer payment in cursed gold, treasure that glitters with an unholy light but turns to ash and bone in the morning sun. To accept these letters is to accept the curse itself. The legend is clear. Any ship that takes on the mail of the damned is doomed. It will never reach its destination. It will be wrecked on an unseen reef, swallowed by a rogue wave, or simply vanish without a trace, its own crew joining the Legion of the Lost. And so, the Flying Dutchman became more than just a ghost story. It became a dire omen. To sea it was a death sentence. Sailors, a notoriously superstitious lot, began to whisper its name in hushed, fearful tones. A sighting of the Dutchman meant your own voyage was doomed. It was a harbinger of storms, of shipwrecks, of disease, and of death. If you saw its glowing sails on the horizon, you were to turn your ship around immediately, no matter the cost. You were to pray to whatever god you held dear and hope the phantom ship hadn't noticed you. Imagine it. You're a sailor in the 18th century, on watch in the dead of night. The sea is black, the fog is a thick, wet blanket, and the only sound is the creak of your own ship's timbers. Suddenly, a light appears where no light should be. It's a sickly green, and it's moving against the wind. The fog parts and you see it. A ship from another era. Its sails in tatters, its rigging coated in an eerie frost. It's unnaturally fast, cutting through the waves without a sound. Figures move on its deck, skeletal and silent. Then it hails you. A voice, ancient and filled with despair, echoes across the water, begging you to take their letters home. The air grows impossibly cold. The compass on your own ship spins wildly. Your crewmates are frozen in terror. This isn't just a story told around a campfire. This is real, and it is a harbinger of your own imminent end. Tales like this began to spread like wildfire through the ports of the world. From Amsterdam to Bristol, from Boston to Cape Town, sailors would share their terrifying, second-hand accounts. They spoke of a ship that could appear and disappear in an instant, a vessel that sailed through solid objects, even other ships. They described its crew as plague-ridden corpses, their eyes burning with hellfire. The legend grew with each telling, each embellishment adding another layer of horror. It became the ultimate mariner's nightmare, the physical embodiment of all the ocean's dangers rolled into one terrifying specter. But were these just tall tales? The drunken ramblings of sailors who had spent too long at sea, their minds warped by isolation and fear? Was the Flying Dutchman simply a mirage, a trick of the light known as a fata morgana, where atmospheric conditions can make distant ships appear to float in the air, distorted and otherworldly? It's a plausible explanation. The waters around the Cape of Good Hope are notorious for strange weather and optical illusions. A tired, frightened sailor, seeing a fata morgana in the middle of a storm, could easily believe he was seeing a ghost ship. For decades, that's what the educated world believed. The Flying Dutchman was a folktale, a powerful metaphor for the dangers of the sea and the folly of human pride. It was a story told to scare young deckhands, nothing more. The sightings were dismissed as illusions, hallucinations, or outright lies. It was a myth, confined to the realm of folklore and superstition. But then something changed. The sightings didn't stop. In fact, they became more frequent, more detailed, and most importantly, they started coming from more credible sources. These weren't just illiterate sailors anymore. They were seasoned captains, naval officers, men of science and standing. And one of these sightings would be so shocking, so well documented by a man whose integrity was beyond question, that it would forever blur the line between legend and reality. The story of the Flying Dutchman was about to sail out of the fog of folklore and into the pages of recorded history, because on a cold night in 1881, the ghost ship was spotted by a man who would one day be crowned King of England. That man was Prince George of Wales, the future King George V, and his account would become one of the most famous and credible sightings in the entire legend. It was just after 4 in the morning on July 11, 1881. The world was dark. Prince George, just 16 years old, was a midshipman aboard the HMS Bacchante, part of a global tour with his older brother, Prince Albert Victor. They were sailing through the Bass Strait, a notoriously treacherous stretch of water between Australia and Tasmania. For days the weather had been foul, but on this night the sea was unnaturally calm, the sky clear. The only sound was the creak of the ship and the gentle slap of waves against the hull. Then they saw it. Appearing off their port bow, bathed in a strange phosphorescent red light, was a phantom ship. It wasn't a faint glimmer or a questionable shape on the horizon. It was clear. So clear, in fact, that the Royal Logbook, a document of official record, described it in chilling detail. It read, "The lookout man on the forecastle reported her as close on the port bow, where also the officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her. A strange red light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the masts, spars and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up. 13 people on the deck of the Bacchante saw it, 2 future kings of England among them. They watched frozen as this spectral vessel, a relic from another century, sailed through the darkness. It bore down on them, seemingly on a collision course, yet it made no sound. No bells, no shouts, no splash of a bow wave. Just an eerie, silent procession, lit by that hellish red glow. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the light vanished and the ship was gone, leaving only the black, empty sea behind. The crew was shaken. This was not some tall tale told over grog in a smoky tavern. This was a shared, vivid experience, witnessed by royalty and recorded in an official naval log. But the strangeness was only just beginning. The story of the Flying Dutchman isn't just about a ghost ship. It's about the curse it carries. And that curse was about to fall upon the HMS Bacchante. The seaman who had first spotted the phantom brig, the lookout on the forecastle, was the first to pay the price. Later that same morning, as the Bacchante continued its voyage, he lost his footing while working high in the rigging. His shipmates could only watch in horror as he fell from the topgallant yardarm, plummeting to the deck below. He was killed instantly. An accident, the official report would say. Tragic coincidence. But to the men who had seen the glowing red ship just hours before, it was anything but. It was the Dutchman's toll. And the curse wasn't finished. Shortly after the incident, the commander of the fleet, Admiral Lord Clanwilliam, was struck by a sudden, debilitating illness. He had to be put ashore at the next port, his health so broken that he would never command at sea again. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the pattern was undeniable. A grim echo of the centuries-old legend. To see the Dutchman is to invite doom. A sailor fell to his death, and an admiral's career was ended. The royal sighting had now become a royal tragedy. This single event did more to legitimize the legend of the Flying Dutchman than any other. It was now a story with a royal stamp of approval. Newspapers from London to New York picked up the tale, broadcasting it to a world hungry for mystery. It was no longer just a myth whispered among sailors. It was a documented paranormal event, a ghost story for the industrial age, backed by the testimony of the British monarchy. But the princes weren't alone. As the 19th century wore on, the age of steam and iron was dawning, yet sightings of this phantom sailing ship persisted, almost as if in defiance of modernity. In 1835, the captain and crew of a British vessel rounding the Cape of Good Hope found themselves in a terrifying storm. As winds howled and waves crashed over their decks, they saw another ship bearing down on them through the squall. It was an old, Dutch-style vessel, its sails bizarrely full despite the hurricane-force winds blowing against it. The British captain hailed them, trying to warn them they were on a collision course, but there was no response. He ordered a hard turn, bracing for impact. The phantom ship came so close they could see the worn wood of its hull and the antique cut of its sails. Then, in the blink of an eye, it vanished into the storm. When the weather finally broke, The British ship was battered but safe. They later learned that another ship, caught in that same storm, had not been so lucky. It had gone down with all hands. These accounts began to form a chillingly consistent profile. The ship was always an archaic design, a vessel out of time. It often appeared in or just before a violent storm, and its appearance was almost always a harbinger of disaster. It was a warning, an omen, a specter of death on the high seas. For years, skeptics and scientists had a simple, elegant explanation for all of this: a fata morgana. It's not a myth. It's a real documented atmospheric phenomenon. It's a type of superior mirage, one that occurs when a layer of warm air sits on top of a layer of much colder air, a condition known as a thermal inversion. This is especially common in polar regions and over large bodies of cold water, like the ocean off the Cape of Good Hope. This temperature difference creates a lens in the atmosphere. Light rays from distant objects, even objects far over the physical horizon, are bent downwards as they pass through this lens. To an observer, this makes the distant object appear to be floating in the sky, often stretched, distorted, and shimmering. A fata morgana can make a distant, barely visible ship look like a towering spectral vessel hovering just miles away. It can even make it appear upside down or impossibly warped. It's a trick of the light, a complex optical illusion painted on the canvas of the sky. This seems like a perfect, rational explanation. A real ship, far over the horizon, has its image projected by the atmosphere, appearing as a ghostly apparition to sailors miles away. The shimmering quality could be mistaken for a supernatural glow. The distortion could make a modern ship look like a strange, old-fashioned vessel. It's neat. It's scientific. It explains away the ghost. But does it really? Does a fata morgana explain why, time and time again, sailors describe not just any ship, but a specific 17th century Dutch East Indiaman? A mirage would project whatever ship was actually over the horizon, be it a modern steamer, a fishing trawler, or another naval vessel. Yet the reports consistently describe the same archaic brig. Does a fata morgana explain the eerie blood-red light that Prince George and 12 other men witnessed so clearly? Mirages bend light. They don't typically create their own specific, hellish color. And most importantly, a fata morgana is just light and air. It cannot cause a healthy young sailor to fall from a mast. It cannot strike down an admiral with a sudden illness. A trick of the light doesn't carry a curse. Science offered a possible explanation for what the sailors saw, but it offered no explanation at all for what happened next. The legend was more than just a visual anomaly. It was an experience, an event, one that seemed to bring tangible physical tragedy in its wake. Science provided a neat, tidy explanation, a trick of the light, but the 20th century was dawning, bringing with it new technologies and new terrible wars. And out on the storm-tossed seas, the Flying Dutchman was about to be seen again, not by a prince in a sailing ship, but by a U-boat commander, peering through his periscope in the heart of World War II, in an encounter that would be officially logged as an enemy engagement. The year is 1942. The war in the Atlantic is a brutal, merciless chess match played across thousands of miles of cold, unforgiving ocean. On one side, the Allied convoys, the lifelines of Britain, desperately ferrying supplies, food, and men. On the other, the German U-boats, the grey wolves of the Kriegsmarine, hunting in packs. They are the apex predators of this new form of warfare. Submerged, silent, they are a constant, invisible threat. Inside one of these steel coffins, deep beneath the waves off the coast of South Africa, near the Cape of Good Hope, the air is thick with the smell of diesel, sweat, and stale coffee. The tension is a physical presence, a hum that vibrates through the hull along with the thrum of the electric motors. For days, the crew of this U-boat has been on patrol, their world reduced to the cramped metal tube around them, the crackle of the radio, and the ping of the hydrophones, listening, always listening, for the rhythmic heartbeat of a freighter's propeller. The commander, a man forged in the discipline and pragmatism of the German Navy, scans the horizon through the periscope. He is a hunter, a man of calculations, angles, and torpedo trajectories. He deals in tonnage and timetables, not in fantasy or folklore. His world is one of cold, hard military reality. Then he sees it, a flicker of movement. He adjusts the focus, his brow furrowed. It's not a destroyer, not a corvette, not a freighter. He squints, his mind refusing to process the image his eyes are sending him. It's a ship, yes, but it's all wrong. It's a sailing vessel. an ancient one with towering masts and vast, tattered sails, impossibly full in a wind that should be pushing it in the opposite direction. It's moving at a speed that defies all logic, cutting through the heavy swells as if they were glass. An eerie, sickly green light seems to bleed from its rigging, casting the entire vessel in a ghostly pallor. He pulls back from the periscope, blinking, shaking his head to clear it. Stress. Fatigue. The ocean plays tricks on you. He's heard the stories, but his duty is to report. He turns to his first officer. Take a look. Bearing 305. Unidentified vessel. The first officer, a younger man, but just as seasoned in the grim business of war, puts his eye to the lens. His posture stiffens. The color drains from his face. He doesn't speak for a long moment. When he finally pulls away, his voice is a strained whisper. Mein Gott. What is it? Your report, Lieutenant. The commander's voice is sharp, demanding the return of order in a world that has suddenly tilted on its axis. It's a sailing ship, her captain. Old design. Very old. But she's making 20 knots? Maybe more. Against the wind. Against the wind. The words hang in the stale air of the control room. Impossible. The crew murmurs, their own fear a rising tide. One by one, the senior officers take a look, and one by one, they turn away with the same expression of disbelief and terror. This is not an enemy they have been trained to fight. This is not in any recognition manual. The commander takes the periscope again. The ship is closer now. He can see the rot in its timbers, the spectral figures of a crew moving on its decks. Their movements jerky, unnatural. They seem to glow with that same hellish light. There is no flag, no identifying marks, only an overwhelming aura of dread that reaches out across the water and seems to penetrate the very hull of their submarine. It's the Flying Dutchman. He knows it. Every sailor knows the story. But to see it here now, it feels like a death sentence. The commander is a man of regulations. An encounter must be logged. But how do you log a ghost? How do you report a nightmare to the cold, bureaucratic machine of high command? He can't write phantom ship. He can't report a 200-year-old legend. They would relieve him of command, send him to a psychiatric ward. So, he does the only thing a man in his position can do. He reduces the ineffable horror to the sterile language of a military report. He orders the radio operator to send a coded message. He logs the contact as an unidentified enemy cruiser of unknown type. He records its impossible speed, its erratic course. He classifies the encounter as an engagement, a brush with a hostile force. Because in his mind it was hostile. It was a violation of the natural order, an omen of such profound despair that it chilled him more than the threat of a dozen allied destroyers. He orders the U-boat to dive deep, to put as much dark water as possible between his men and the thing on the surface. As they descend into the crushing blackness, no one speaks. The only sound is the creaking of the hull, a sound that is suddenly all too reminiscent of the groaning timbers of an ancient galleon. This report, and others like it, would make their way up the chain of command, eventually landing on the desk of Admiral Karl Donitz, the architect of the U-boat strategy. Donitz was a brilliant, ruthless tactician, but he was also a man who understood the sea and the minds of the men who sailed it. He knew that the stress of constant mortal danger, the profound isolation, and the sheer hypnotic emptiness of the ocean could wear down even the most hardened sailor. And the sighting off the Cape of Good Hope was not an isolated incident. Throughout the war, from both Allied and Axis sailors, came a strange trickle of similar reports. A British submarine in the same waters reported a ghostly sailing ship that vanished from sight. An Allied convoy, zigzagging to avoid torpedoes, reported steaming directly through an antique vessel that flickered and disappeared as they passed. Skeptics, of course, had their explanations. Fata Morgana, a complex mirage that can make ships appear to float in the air or alter their appearance, is common in those waters. The extreme stress of combat could easily lead to shared hallucinations, a psychological phenomenon where an entire crew, primed by fear and folklore, could convince themselves they saw the same impossible thing. But the details were always so specific. The incredible speed against the wind, the eerie light, the ancient design of the ship. It was always the same vessel. It wasn't just any mirage, it was the Flying Dutchman. And for the men in the U-boats, locked for months in a submerged world of shadow and fear, the line between mirage and reality between folklore and a tactical threat, began to blur. The Dutchman became more than a story. It became a symbol of the Atlantic itself, haunted, cursed, and utterly indifferent to the lives of men. It was a reminder that long before their modern war of steel and torpedoes, the ocean held older, deeper terrors. The war would eventually end. The U-boats would be scuttled or surrendered, but the Dutchman, unbound by human conflicts, would continue its endless patrol. The phantom ship's journey was far from over. It would soon leave the battle-scarred waters of the Second World War behind, only to reappear decades later, not as a fleeting image in a periscope, but as a terrifyingly solid reality for a small family on a pleasure cruise, proving that the curse of Captain Decken was not just for sailors at war, but for anyone who strayed into his doomed path. The year is 1977. Off the coast of South Africa, near the very same Cape of Good Hope that sealed Decken's fate, the Henderson family was enjoying a quiet afternoon on their small yacht, the Circe. John Henderson, a seasoned amateur sailor, was at the helm, while his wife and 2 teenage children relaxed on deck. The weather was clear, the seas were calm, the perfect day. But the ocean, as any sailor knows, holds its secrets just beneath a placid surface. It started with a change in the air. A sudden, inexplicable chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The sky, a moment before a brilliant blue, seemed to take on a sickly greenish-gray tint directly ahead of them. John's son Mark was the first to see it. He pointed, his voice a half-whisper. "Dad, what is that?" John followed his gaze. In the distance, where there had been only empty ocean, a ship was bearing down on them. But it was unlike any ship he had ever seen. It was an old vessel, a 17th-century merchantman, with towering masts and tattered, black sails that seemed to drink the sunlight. It moved with an unnatural speed, cutting through the water without a wake, silent as a tomb. A feeling of primal dread washed over the deck of the Circe. This wasn't a historical replica on a tour. There was a palpable aura of malice and despair emanating from the approaching ship. As it drew closer, they could make out details that would haunt their nightmares for years. The wood of the hull was slick with green slime, rotted and ancient. The rigging was frayed, hanging like skeletal fingers. And on the deck, they could see figures, gaunt and spectral, moving with slow, repetitive motions, their faces hollowed out by an eternity of suffering. Then they saw him. Standing on the quarterdeck, a tall figure in archaic clothing, his face a mask of rage and madness. His eyes, even from a distance, seemed to burn with a cold, unholy light. He raised a hand, not in a wave, but in a gesture that felt like a curse. The Henderson family was frozen, paralyzed by a terror they couldn't comprehend. The ghost ship was on a collision course. John frantically tried to turn the yacht, but it felt sluggish, as if held in place by an unseen force. The colossal vessel was almost upon them, its bowsprit looming over their tiny boat like the maw of some great sea beast. They braced for impact, for the splintering of wood and the cold embrace of the sea. They closed their eyes, and then nothing. When they dared to look again, it was gone. Vanished. The sky was blue, the air was warm, and the sea was empty. The only evidence it had ever been there was the frantic, hammering beat of their own hearts and a lingering foul stench of saltwater decay and something else. Something like old death. They didn't speak a word. John Henderson turned the Circe around and headed back to port. The family's idyllic vacation shattered forever. This account, and hundreds like it, forces us to ask the hard question. Are all these people, princes, naval officers, seasoned sailors, entire crews, and ordinary families, all lying? Are they all mad? Or is there something else at play? For centuries, skeptics and scientists have tried to anchor the Flying Dutchman in the calm harbor of rational explanation. And their primary suspect is a bizarre and beautiful phenomenon of the natural world, the Fata Morgana. Now, this isn't your typical desert highway mirage, the kind that makes you see a shimmering puddle of water that isn't there. A Fata Morgana is a superior mirage. It's incredibly complex and happens when a layer of warm air sits on top of a layer of much colder air. A condition known as a thermal inversion, which is very common out at sea. This atmospheric duct acts like a refracting lens. Light rays from distant objects, like a ship far over the horizon, get bent and distorted as they pass through these layers. The results can be mind-bending. A Fata Morgana can make a ship that is physically below the horizon appear to be floating in the sky. It can stretch, compress, and invert the image, making a modern fishing trawler look like a towering galleon from a bygone era. It can make the ship appear to be sailing through the clouds or even upside down. And because the air layers are constantly shifting and shimmering, the image itself appears unstable, hazy, and ethereal, exactly like a ghost. Imagine you're a sailor in the 18th century. You've been at sea for months. You look to the horizon and see an image of a ship sailing through the air, its masts impossibly tall, its shape wavering and indistinct. You wouldn't think thermal inversion. You'd think ghost ship. You'd think you'd just seen the devil's work. It's a compelling explanation. It accounts for the spectral appearance, the impossible locations, and the way the ship seems to vanish in an instant as the atmospheric conditions change. It provides a neat scientific box to put all these terrifying stories in. But it's not a perfect fit. Not by a long shot. A Fata Morgana can explain a distant, distorted image. But it cannot explain the Henderson family's encounter. It cannot explain the close-up view of a rotting hull, of gaunt spectral figures on the deck, of a mad captain's burning eyes. A mirage doesn't generate a feeling of primal dread. It doesn't create the stench of decay. It doesn't project a specific, consistent legend of a Dutch captain who swore an oath to round the Cape. How does a mirage explain the multiple witnesses on HMS Bacchante all seeing the exact same details, down to the red light of the phantom ship? Mass hallucination? Perhaps. But for that phenomenon to repeat itself on dozens of ships across hundreds of years, with witnesses reporting the same ship with the same backstory, the odds become astronomical. The Fata Morgana theory explains the what? A weird-looking ship. But it completely fails to explain the who and the why. It doesn't explain the crew trying to pass letters to the dead. It doesn't explain the consistent narrative of Captain Decken. A mirage is a random, chaotic distortion of a real object. The Flying Dutchman is a specific, recurring character in a centuries-long horror story. And that's where the legend takes an even darker turn. Because for many sailors, seeing the Dutchman wasn't just a spooky encounter. It wasn't just a story to tell back in port. It was a death sentence. The ship wasn't just a ghost, it was an omen, a harbinger of doom. To see the Flying Dutchman on the waves meant your own ship would soon be under them. The legend evolved to say that Decken, in his eternal misery, grew jealous of other sailors who could make port, who could die. And so, his appearance was a curse, dragging other ships down to share his watery hell. Sailors would tell stories of perfectly sound vessels, competently crewed, that would encounter the Dutchman in a storm, only to vanish from the face of the earth moments later. It was said the ghost ship would hail them, and to answer was to seal your fate. To accept a letter from their ghostly crew was to condemn your soul. The Dutchman became more than a myth. It became the personification of the sea's wrath. A supernatural explanation for the thousands of unexplained disappearances that litter maritime history. And in 1909, this belief would be put to the ultimate test. A brand new state-of-the-art passenger liner, a ship dubbed the Titanic of the Southern Ocean, would set sail on a calm sea watched by hundreds. It was the pride of the Blue Anchor Line, a vessel considered by many to be virtually unsinkable. On its final fateful voyage from Durban to Cape Town, it would steam directly into the hunting grounds of the Flying Dutchman. Multiple ships in the area would report seeing a strange, old-fashioned steamer making incredible speed in the heavy seas, right before the new liner, and all 211 souls aboard her vanished from the world without a single trace. The search for the SS Warada became one of the largest and most desperate in maritime history. For months, ships crisscrossed the Indian Ocean, scanning the waves for any sign of the lost liner. They were looking for the telltale clues of a disaster. A splintered lifeboat, a floating deck chair, a life preserver bearing the ship's name. They found nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was as if a 500-foot, 9,000-ton steel vessel, a floating hotel carrying over 200 souls, had been plucked from the surface of the earth by an invisible hand. The official inquiries were a mess of confusion and contradiction. Theories were thrown around like confetti in a storm. Some said she was top-heavy, a design flaw that made her unstable. They claimed a rogue wave, a monster of the sea, had caught her at the wrong angle and rolled her over in an instant, trapping everyone inside as she plunged to the crushing depths. Others whispered of a catastrophic boiler explosion, a blast so violent it tore the ship apart from the inside out. But all these theories, as logical as they seemed on paper, slammed into the same impenetrable wall: the complete and total lack of wreckage. A ship of that size doesn't just sink without a trace. Even in a violent end, something survives. Debris fields from sunken ships can stretch for miles. Yet the Warada left behind only a gaping wound in the ocean's memory. And then there were the other reports, the ones the official inquiries didn't want to touch. The stories from the sailors on other ships who had been battling that same storm. They spoke of the phantom steamer, the one seen plowing through the impossible waves at an impossible speed. The captain of the Clan McIntyre, a ship that was in the area, reported seeing a steamer belching an unusual amount of smoke, overtaking him easily before vanishing into a squall. He assumed it was the Warada, but his ship was barely making 3 knots in the storm. For another ship to overtake him like that, it would have to be moving at a speed that was suicidal, if not physically impossible in those conditions. Was this the same strange old-fashioned steamer others had reported? The one that looked like it belonged to a bygone era? The one that appeared and disappeared like a ghost in the gale? For the sailors of the early 20th century, men who lived by the sea and its superstitions, the answer was chillingly obvious. They knew what ship could sail against the fiercest gales, what ship was a harbinger of doom, what ship collected the souls of the drowned. The Warada hadn't been sunk by a wave or an explosion. It had met the Flying Dutchman. It had seen the ghost ship, and as the legend foretold, it was never seen again. This incident cemented the Dutchman's place in the modern age. It wasn't just some ancient tale whispered by sailors in smoky taverns anymore. This was a 20th century mystery, a state-of-the-art steamship vanishing off the face of the planet, with the phantom's spectral form as the only witness. But as shocking as the Warada case was, it was far from the most credible sighting of the era. That distinction belongs to an encounter that occurred 30 years prior, an encounter so well documented and witnessed by such unimpeachable individuals that it remains one of the most compelling pieces of paranormal evidence in history. Because the key witness was none other than the future King of England. The year is 1881. Aboard the Royal Navy vessel HMS Bacchante, 2 young men are on a 3-year tour of the British Empire. They are Prince Albert Victor and his younger brother, Prince George of Wales. This isn't a pleasure cruise. It's part of their naval training, meant to forge them into leaders. And it is here, in the vast empty expanse of the ocean between Melbourne and Sydney, Australia, that they would have an experience that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. In the pre-dawn hours of July 11th, the sea was calm, the sky clear. The watch was on deck, the ship cutting quietly through the dark water. At 4 a.m., a strange light appeared off the port bow. It wasn't another ship's lantern. It was an ethereal phosphorescent red glow. As the men on deck stared, the light grew brighter, and out of the darkness, a shape began to resolve itself. It was a sailing ship, a brig, but it was unlike anything they had ever seen. The entire vessel, its hull, its masts, its spars, was bathed in this same unnatural crimson light. It stood out against the dark sea like a phantom inkblot, a ship made not of wood and canvas, but of pure bloody light. The officer of the watch, a seasoned naval man, saw it. The midshipman on duty saw it. And on the bridge, the 16-year-old Prince George saw it too. He documented the entire event in the ship's official log, his own handwriting recording the impossible sight. His entry reads, quote, July 11th. At 4 a.m. the Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. A strange red light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the masts, spars and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow. He describes how the officer on watch sent a midshipman to the forecastle to get a closer look, but by the time he got there, the ship was gone. There was no trace of it. The sky was clear, the sea was empty, and the phantom had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. It was a mass sighting, witnessed by no fewer than 13 crew members, including the 2 princes. This wasn't a tired sailor hallucinating in the dark. This was an event observed and recorded by the future King George V. But the story doesn't end there. The legend of the Dutchman is not just about a ghost ship, it's about a curse. It is an omen of terrible misfortune. And that morning, the curse did not wait long to make itself known. At 10:45 a.m., just 6 hours after the sighting, the very seaman who had first spotted the phantom ship was sent aloft to work on the rigging. As his crewmates watched from the deck below, he lost his footing and fell from the foremost topmast crosstrees, plummeting to the deck. He was killed instantly. The logbook entry, again in Prince George's hand, is stark and chilling. The man who first saw the Flying Dutchman fell from the foretopmast crosstrees and was smashed to atoms. The curse had claimed its first victim. But the admiral in command of the squadron, a man of science and reason, was not so easily swayed. He fell ill shortly after the incident, and though he recovered, he would later be recorded as the first known case of death from typhoid fever in Australia, a strange and unfortunate end. Coincidence? Perhaps. But for the crew of the HMS Bacchante, the connection was undeniable. They had seen the harbinger of doom, and death had followed in its wake. This account is monumental. It's not a third-hand story passed down through generations. It is a primary source document, written in the official log of a British naval vessel, by a man who would one day rule the largest empire the world had ever known. It is a calm, factual, and utterly baffling description of a paranormal event. Skeptics have tried for over a century to explain it away. They call it a mirage, a trick of the light caused by atmospheric conditions reflecting the image of a distant ship. They point to bioluminescent algae, glowing plankton that could have clung to a vessel, making it appear to glow. But none of these explanations quite fit. A mirage wouldn't be so crisp and clear, so universally seen from the same perspective by 13 different people. Bioluminescence doesn't create a uniform, blood-red light that illuminates the masts and sails from within. And most importantly, neither a mirage nor a cluster of glowing plankton can explain the sudden violent death that followed just hours later. The royal sighting remains one of the most powerful and perplexing pieces of the Flying Dutchman puzzle. It elevates the story from a simple sea shanty to a documented phenomenon, witnessed by royalty and paid for in blood. It forces us to ask, what did the future King of England and his crew truly see in the dark waters off Australia? Was it a simple optical illusion, or was it a brush with a legendary curse, a curse that was still very much alive, and still very much hunting the lonely oceans of the world? The report from the future King of England was meticulous. 13 men, including Prince George himself, saw the phantom brig. They described it in detail. A strange red phosphorescent light illuminating its masts, its spars, and its hull, as if the ship itself were the source of its own unholy glow. For a moment it hung there on the horizon, a specter against the dark Australian sky. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. There was no trace of it anywhere. The royal midshipmen were baffled. They were men of science and reason, sailors in the most advanced navy on the planet. Yet, what they saw defied all logical explanation. The dread that settled over the HMS Bacchante was palpable, and it seemed justified. Just a few hours later, at 10:45 that same morning, the very sailor who had first spotted the phantom ship fell from the foretopmast crosstrees to the deck below. He was killed instantly. The ship's log recorded it as a tragic accident. But to the crew, whispering in the dark corners of the vessel, it was no accident. It was the price of seeing the Dutchman. The curse had reached out from the spectral world and claimed a life. Was it a grim coincidence? A freak accident born of exhaustion and the treacherous life at sea? Or was the legend real? Was this the toll for witnessing the damned? This sighting, coming from such an impeccable source, reignited the world's fascination with the legend. But it also armed skeptics with a new weapon, a scientific explanation that seemed, on the surface, to solve the mystery once and for all. They called it a fata morgana. It's a complex and beautiful form of superior mirage, an optical phenomenon that occurs when rays of light are bent as they pass through layers of air at different temperatures. Imagine the air over the ocean on a calm day, with a layer of cold, dense air sitting just above the water, and a layer of warmer, lighter air sitting on top of that. This boundary between the layers can act like a refracting lens. Light from a distant object, like a ship that's actually far over the horizon, travels through this atmospheric lens. It gets bent, stretched, and distorted. The result can be breathtaking. It can make a ship that is physically out of sight appear to float in the air, inverted, or impossibly magnified. It can create shimmering, ethereal images that look like castles in the sky or, indeed, a glowing, ghostly vessel. To a sailor in the 19th century, unfamiliar with the physics of atmospheric optics, a fata morgana would look like pure magic, pure supernatural terror. It would look exactly like a ghost ship. This explanation is clean. It's elegant. It satisfies our modern need for rational scientific answers. It allows us to neatly file the Flying Dutchman away in a drawer labeled folklore and optical illusions. And for many sightings, it's probably the correct explanation. A tired sailor, staring into the monotonous horizon for hours, sees a shimmering distortion in the air, and their mind, steeped in the stories and superstitions of the sea, fills in the blanks. The Fata Morgana provides the image, the human brain provides the narrative. But there's a problem, a big one. The Fata Morgana explanation doesn't fit all the facts. It doesn't explain the chilling consistency of the sightings across centuries and across oceans. Witnesses don't just see a distorted ship, they see a very specific ship. An archaic 17th century vessel, often a Dutch flight or East Indiaman, with its high rounded stern and distinctive rigging. A Fata Morgana simply reflects and distorts what is already there, over the horizon. So where, in the 20th century, are all these 17th century ships hiding for their reflections to be seen? It doesn't explain why the ship is so often seen in stormy weather, when the atmospheric conditions for a superior mirage are least likely to occur. And it certainly doesn't explain the malevolent intelligence witnesses report, the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. An optical illusion doesn't have intent. It doesn't inspire a unique, bone-deep dread that 1,000 other mirages do not. And it doesn't kill the man who sees it first. The legend, it seemed, was more durable than science. It refused to die. And as the world plunged into the age of steam, steel, and global conflict, the Flying Dutchman sailed right along with it. The age of sail may have ended, but the age of the ghost ship was far from over. Take the account from World War II. In the middle of the Battle of the Atlantic, where German U-boats and Allied convoys played a deadly game of cat and mouse, the sea was a place of paranoia and sudden death. In this cauldron of modern warfare, there was no room for ancient superstitions. Or so you would think. In 1942, the log of a German submarine, U-boat 68, operating off the coast of South Africa near the Cape of Good Hope, recorded a strange encounter. The crew, led by a pragmatic and hardened commander, was on the surface. Suddenly a lookout cried out. There, on the horizon, was a sailing ship. But it wasn't a modern vessel. It was a bark, a three-masted ship from a bygone era, sailing at an impossible speed directly into a fierce headwind. The U-boat commander, a man named Carl Friedrich Merton, a decorated officer of the Kriegsmarine, watched it through his binoculars. He described it as an old sailing ship. It glowed with a faint, eerie light. It had no flags, no signs of life. It was just there. A relic from another time, gate-crashing the most brutal, technologically advanced war in human history. The German sailors, men who faced depth charges and destroyers without flinching, were terrified. This was an enemy they couldn't fire a torpedo at. This was an omen. This was the Dutchman. Merton noted it in his logbook, a bizarre, inexplicable footnote in a diary of war. The ship sailed on against the wind and vanished. The stories kept coming. In 1959, the passengers and crew of the Straat Majohane, a Dutch freighter, had a well-documented encounter. It was a clear, calm day. People were on deck, enjoying the placid waters of the South Atlantic. Suddenly, the lookout pointed. Everyone turned to look, and they saw it. A ship, pale and gray, moving silently across the water. It was ancient. It had no sails set, yet it moved as if driven by a phantom wind. The captain, a man named P. Algra, studied it through his binoculars. He saw a 17th century East Indiaman, a perfect detailed image. He described it as a veritable ghost ship. Dozens of witnesses, passengers and crew alike, stood on the deck of their modern steel vessel and watched a ghost from 300 years in the past sail by. They felt a profound and inexplicable sadness wash over them, a feeling of immense loneliness and despair emanating from the silent vessel. Then, as with all the other sightings, it simply faded away, dissolving into the empty ocean. What are we to make of this? Are these all just lies? Mass hysteria? Is it possible for dozens of people, from U-boat sailors to civilian passengers, to all share the same hallucination? The same Fata Morgana? Seems unlikely. The legend of the Flying Dutchman is more than just a sailor's yarn. It has become a psychological fixture, a permanent resident of the collective maritime unconscious. The ocean is the last great wilderness on our planet. It is vast, powerful, and profoundly indifferent to human life. In its depths, our technology and our confidence can be stripped away in an instant, leaving us feeling small and vulnerable. Perhaps the Dutchman is the embodiment of that vulnerability. It represents the ultimate fear of every sailor, to be lost at sea, to never reach home. to be condemned to an eternity of pointless, lonely wandering. It's a story that warns of hubris, of defying nature and God. But the evidence, the eyewitness accounts from credible, sober people in the modern era, suggests it may be something more. More than a mirage, more than a metaphor. The sightings in the 20th century prove one thing beyond a doubt. Whatever this phenomenon is, it did not fade with the age of wooden ships and canvas sails. It adapted. It endured. And as the decades rolled on, the nature of the encounters began to shift. The ship was no longer just a passive, distant omen. It was getting closer. The question was evolving from if you would see it, to what would happen when it finally noticed you. The most chilling encounters are the ones you don't expect. The ones that happen on a calm sea under a clear sky when everything feels safe. For two young princes of the British Empire, that moment came in the dead of night on the far side of the world. It was July 11, 1881. Prince Albert Victor and his younger brother, Prince George, the man who would one day be King George V, were midshipmen aboard the HMS Bacchante, sailing off the coast of Australia. This was part of a grand tour, a naval education meant to shape them into leaders. But the sea had a different lesson in store for them that night. At 4 in the morning, the watch was changing. The air was still, the ocean a sheet of black glass. Then a light appeared. It wasn't a star, and it wasn't another ship on the horizon. It was a strange, phantom-like red glow. As the men on deck stared, a shape began to resolve itself from the darkness. It was a brig, an old-fashioned, two-masted sailing ship, but it was surrounded by this unnatural, spectral luminescence. In his own logbook, the future king would write, "The lookout man on the forecastle reported her as close on the port bow, where also the officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her." This wasn't one man's tired eyes playing tricks on him. 13 men in total, including the two royal princes, saw it. The ship was a dark silhouette against its own hellish red light. They could make out its masts, its yards, its sails, all perfectly defined. It was moving fast, cutting through the water on a course that would take it directly across their bow. The officer of the watch gave the order to signal the vessel, to find out who they were. But there was no reply. No light answered their own. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. It didn't sail away. It didn't sink. It simply vanished into the night, leaving nothing behind but a stunned silence and the cold sea air. The crew of the Bacchante searched the horizon. There was nothing. No trace of any ship. No wreckage, no distant light. It was as if it had never been there. But 13 men knew what they had seen. They had seen the Flying Dutchman. For the young princes, it was a thrilling, terrifying story to tell. But for the crew, a cold dread began to set in. They knew the legend. They knew that seeing the ghost ship was a terrible omen. They just didn't realize how quickly the curse would claim its price. At 10:45 that same morning, just a few hours after the sighting, the seaman who had been the very first to spot the phantom ship was sent aloft. He was one of the best, nimble and sure-footed. But as he climbed the rigging of the foretopmast, he lost his footing. The crew watched in horror as he fell to the deck below. He was killed instantly. The omen had been fulfilled. The Dutchman had been seen, and a life had been taken. The first of many. The admiral in command of the naval squadron, who had also been aboard the Bacchante, would fall gravely ill soon after, dying before the year was out. The ship had noticed them, and it had left its mark. This incident, witnessed by royalty and recorded in an official naval log, cemented the Dutchman's reputation as more than just a folktale. It was an active, malevolent force. And it wasn't just a harbinger of accidental death or illness. Other stories, passed down in hushed tones from one generation of sailors to the next, spoke of a more direct, more terrifying interaction. They spoke of the Dutchman trying to make contact. Imagine you're the captain of a merchant vessel, battling a fierce storm off the Cape of Good Hope. The waves are crashing over your deck, the wind is tearing at your sails, and your men are exhausted. Suddenly, through the sheeting rain and spray, you see it. An ancient, battered ship, sails ripped to shreds, bearing down on you. It sails against the wind with impossible speed. A figure stands on its deck, gaunt and wild-eyed, hailing you. This is Captain van der Straeten, and he wants something from you. He and his crew are desperate. They try to lower a small boat filled with letters. Letters from the damned. They are addressed to friends, to wives, to children, all of whom have been dead for centuries. The crew of the Dutchman begs you, pleads with you, to take their mail and deliver it. They are trapped in a loop, forever trying to reach a home that no longer exists, a world that has forgotten them. Now you have a choice. Terrible choice. The legends say that to accept the letters is to accept their curse. Any ship that takes the mail from the Flying Dutchman is never seen again. It's dragged down to the depths or perhaps joins the ghost ship in its eternal hopeless voyage. But to refuse is to anger a damned and powerful spirit. Many a captain who spurned the Dutchman's plea found their ship suddenly overwhelmed by the storm, the winds turning against them with a new vengeful fury, as if guided by an unseen hand. It was a no-win situation. The ship was no longer just a passive omen you saw from afar. Now it was an interactive nightmare. As the world moved into the 20th century, one might think a legend like this would fade away. The age of sail gave way to the age of steam and steel. Wooden ships were replaced by massive iron dreadnoughts. Superstition was supposed to be replaced by science and reason, but the Flying Dutchman didn't care about progress. It continued to sail the world's oceans, a relic of a bygone era haunting a modern world. And it found a new terrible stage, the world at war. During the Second World War, with the Atlantic Ocean a deadly chessboard for Allied convoys and German U-boats, the sightings became even more bizarre. These weren't tales told over rum in a tavern anymore. These were accounts from highly trained naval officers and submarine crews, men who knew the difference between a real ship and a trick of the light. One of the most famous accounts came from the other side of the conflict. It said that the crew of a German U-boat, commanded by none other than the future Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, logged a sighting of the Dutchman while patrolling near the Cape. Picture it. You're in the claustrophobic confines of a submarine, deep in enemy territory. You surface at night to recharge your batteries, the air thick with tension. Every shadow could be an enemy destroyer. Then on the hydrophones you hear something impossible. The creaking of a wooden hull, the groaning of ropes. You look through the periscope and see it. A 17th century sailing ship, glowing with that same eerie light, plowing through the waves where no such ship should be. For these submariners, men of cold, calculated technological warfare, what could they possibly think? It was an apparition that defied all logic. A ghost sailing through the middle of the deadliest conflict in human history. Allied sailors saw it too. There are numerous reports from convoy ships of a strange, antique vessel appearing in the middle of a storm or during a U-boat attack, only to vanish without a trace. It was seen as a terrible omen of a sinking to come, but it also raised a deeper, more unsettling question. What was its purpose? It didn't take sides. It was seen by British, Americans, and Germans alike. It was simply there, a silent, eternal observer, indifferent to the struggles and the slaughter of the modern world. It had been sailing long before their war began, and it would be sailing long after it was over. The nature of the curse was changing once again. The Dutchman was no longer just a threat to your life or your ship. It was now a threat to your sanity. It forced hardened, rational men to confront the impossible, to question the very reality of the world they fought and died for. The old fear was about the ship bringing a storm or causing an accident. But a new, more psychological horror began to creep into the legend. The horror of meaninglessness. The horror of a universe that contained such impossible, indifferent things. And as the 20th century wore on, a new question began to surface in the minds of those who studied the legend. What if the greatest danger wasn't seeing the Flying Dutchman at all? What if the real curse was being invited to join its crew? For centuries, sailors feared the sight of the phantom ship, a harbinger of doom that promised shattered hulls and watery graves. But the legend evolved, as all living stories do. It twisted and darkened, and a new, more intimate horror began to creep into the tales told in hushed tones below deck. The fear was no longer just about seeing the ship. It was about being seen by it. The curse wasn't just witnessing damnation. It was being offered a place within it. Imagine you're on a ship, weeks from land, the food is running low, the water is brackish, and a storm has been tearing at your sails for 3 days straight. You're exhausted, soaked to the bone, and your hope is a flickering candle flame away from being extinguished. Then through the shrieking wind and the sheets of rain you see it. The Dutchman doesn't look like a wreck. It looks powerful, defiant, cutting through waves that threaten to swallow your own vessel whole. A figure stands at the prow, silhouetted against the eerie glow of its lanterns. He doesn't look like a monster. He looks like a captain. He looks like salvation. And he calls out to you. Not with a threat, but with an offer. An end to your suffering. A place on a ship that can never sink, a crew that can never die. A promise of escaping the storm. This is the ultimate temptation, the devil's bargain offered not in a crossroads at midnight, but in the heart of the unforgiving sea. To a desperate man, damnation can look a lot like deliverance. What happens when you say yes? What is life, or the grim mockery of it, like for the crew of the Flying Dutchman? The accounts differ, painting a fragmented portrait of eternal misery. Some tales describe them as skeletons, their bones rattling with the roll of the ship, forever performing the duties they had in life. They hoist phantom ropes, scrub decks that will never be clean, and stare out at an ocean that offers no horizon, only the next wave. In these versions, they are mindless automatons, their souls scoured away, leaving only the shell of a sailor's routine. But other, more chilling versions of the legend insist the crew retains their consciousness. They are not mindless skeletons, they are trapped men. They remember their lives. They remember the sun on their faces, the warmth of a woman's touch, the taste of fresh bread. And it is this memory that becomes their eternal torment. They are forced to live, day in and day out, with the full crushing weight of what they've lost. They are surrounded by the ghosts of their former selves, haunted by the choices that led them to this floating purgatory. The ship itself becomes a prison of the mind. The work is endless and pointless. They raise the sails to catch a wind that will never take them to port. They chart courses for lands they can never reach. They are trapped in a loop, a single agonizing moment of a storm-tossed sea stretched out into infinity. The salt spray doesn't feel refreshing. It feels like acid, a constant reminder of the living world they've been barred from. The creak of the timbers isn't the sound of a sturdy vessel, it's the groaning of their own souls. And then there is the mail, the letters. The crew's most famous and perhaps cruelest task. They are compelled to offer their bundles of letters to any ship they meet. Letters written to the long dead, to sweethearts and wives who crumbled to dust centuries ago. Why? Is it a desperate, futile attempt to connect with a world that has forgotten them? Or is it something more sinister? A part of the curse itself, an act designed to spread the contagion of their sorrow, to remind the living that the damned are still out there, just beyond the veil of the storm. Think of the psychological toll. Every letter they handle is a ghost, a tangible piece of a life they can never have. It's a message in a bottle from a hell of their own choosing. They are not just sailors, they are spectral postmen, their delivery route a circle, their cargo an unbearable weight of grief and regret. They are forced to participate in their own damnation, to be the active agents of the legend that ensnares them. One of the most terrifying, though lesser known, tales concerns a young whaler named Finn. His ship had been stranded in the ice for months, the crew slowly succumbing to starvation and madness. One night, during a blinding blizzard, a thaw came as unnaturally as a summer's day in winter. A channel opened in the ice, and through it sailed the Dutchman, its lanterns cutting through the snow. Captain Decken offered Finn's crew a choice: stay and freeze or sail with him and live forever. Finn, seeing his crewmates as little more than walking corpses, accepted. He stepped from the ice-locked whaler onto the deck of the ghost ship. First it was a relief. The ship was warm. There was food on the table. A ghostly feast that tasted like ash but filled his stomach. The crew was silent, but they were orderly, efficient. He thought he had made the right choice. He thought he had survived. The horror crept in slowly. He noticed the crew never slept. They never spoke. They just worked, their eyes fixed on some distant, unseen point. He tried to speak to them, but they looked through him as if he were glass. He tried to remember his mother's face, but the image was like a watercolor painting left out in the rain, the features bleeding away until nothing was left. He tried to recall the name of his home port, but it was a word without meaning. The final terror came when the Dutchman next encountered a living ship. Finn felt a compulsion he couldn't resist. He walked to the railing, and he heard his own voice, a hollow echo, calling out to the terrified sailors on the other vessel. He heard himself making an offer, an end to their suffering, a place on a ship that can never sink, a promise of escaping the storm. He had become one of them. The curse wasn't just to be a passenger on the ship, it was to become its recruiter, its apostle, forever seeking new souls to share in the endless misery. The victim becomes the predator, ensuring the crew is never depleted, ensuring the legend never dies. This transforms the curse from a personal tragedy into a self-perpetuating nightmare. The crew of the Flying Dutchman are not just prisoners, They are the prison guards. They are the engine of their own damnation. This is the true horror of being invited aboard. You don't just lose your life, you lose your soul. You lose your very self, hollowed out and replaced by a single burning desire to make others as damned as you are. The ship, then, is more than just a vessel. It's a metaphor for a trap with no exit. It's the embodiment of being stuck in a cycle of despair, where the only comfort is dragging others down with you. It sails on, not just because of a captain's blasphemous oath, but because it is powered by the perpetual motion machine of human regret and misery. So the ship plows through the waves, its crew a silent testament to the danger of desperation. They are a warning that some offers of salvation come at too high a price, that sometimes it is better to go down with your ship, clinging to your soul, than to accept a hand that pulls you into an eternity of nothingness. But if this curse is so absolute, so all-consuming, can it ever be broken? If a man's soul can be lost so completely, is there any force in heaven or on earth that can possibly reclaim it? For centuries, the answer seemed to be a resounding no. The Dutchman was as eternal as the tides. But as the legend grew, a new element began to appear in the story. A glimmer of hope, a single fragile key that might unlock the most infamous prison on the seven seas. A final chapter, not of damnation but of redemption. This new condition, this escape clause, was cemented in the public imagination not by a sailor's tale, but by a thunderous sweeping work of art. Richard Wagner's 1843 opera, Der Fliegende Holländer. It was Wagner who took the scattered threads of folklore and wove them into the definitive tragic romance that we know today. In his version, the curse is both specific and cruel. The tormented captain is granted a single day of shore leave, but only once every 7 years. In that brief window, he must find a woman who will love him and vow to be true unto death. If she keeps her vow, her faithfulness will shatter his curse, and he will finally find peace. If she breaks it, she is damned along with him, and he is cast back to the sea for another 7 years of torment. For centuries he has tried and failed. Every 7 years he steps onto land, a heart full of weary hope, only to find a world of fleeting promises and faithless hearts. He has become convinced that such a woman does not exist, that his damnation is absolute. But then in a small Norwegian fishing village he meets Senta. Senta is a dreamer, a young woman utterly captivated by the legend of the Dutchman. She has spent her life staring at an old portrait of the ghostly captain that hangs in her home, singing songs of his sorrow, and telling anyone who will listen that she is the one destined to save him. Her fiancé, Erik, pleads with her to forget this morbid fantasy, but her obsession is absolute. And then one day, a stranger walks through her door. It is the Dutchman himself, his face a mask of sorrow, identical to the man in the portrait. He has come to seek shelter, his 7 years up once more. When he sees Senta, a woman who looks at him not with fear, but with a profound, almost divine recognition, a flicker of hope he thought long dead is rekindled. He tells her of his cursed treasure and his lonely fate, testing her resolve. But Senta doesn't waver. She looks into the eyes of the damned captain and without hesitation, pledges her eternal faithfulness. She sees not a monster, but a man in desperate need of salvation, and she offers herself as the anchor for his soul. But fate, as always, is cruel. The Dutchman overhears a heated argument between Senta and her former love, Erik. Erik reminds her of her past promises to him, and the Dutchman, his heart conditioned by centuries of betrayal, misinterprets the scene. He believes Senta is just like all the others, that she is about to break her vow to him. In a surge of despair, but also a final noble act of love, he decides he must leave. He cannot bear the thought of dragging her into his damnation. He rushes to the shore, back to his blood-red sails and spectral crew, shouting to the horrified villagers his true identity. "You know me not. I am the Flying Dutchman." As his cursed ship begins to pull away, back towards its eternal prison on the waves, Senta makes the ultimate choice. She runs to the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea. Proving her vow was no mere fantasy, she cries out, "Praise to your angel and his decree. Here I stand, faithful unto thee." And with that, she leaps into the violent, churning ocean. Her sacrifice is the ultimate act of faithfulness. And it is enough. In that instant, the curse is broken. The phantom ship, the Flying Dutchman, which has haunted the seas for centuries, finally splinters and sinks into the abyss, its long voyage at an end. and from the wreckage, the transfigured spirits of Senta and the Dutchman are seen ascending into the heavens, finally united in a peace he had long believed impossible. It's a beautiful, tragic, and powerful ending. But why? Why does this story, whether it ends in damnation or redemption, still hold such a powerful grip on our imagination? Because the Flying Dutchman is more than just a ghost ship. It is a vessel for our deepest, most primal fears and our most profound hopes. It represents the terror of the unknown, the vast, indifferent power of the ocean, a force that can swallow ships and sailors without a trace. In an age before satellites and GPS, the sea was the final frontier, and the Dutchman was the ultimate symbol of what could go wrong when you dared to challenge it. The captain himself embodies the classic, timeless warning against hubris. He is the man who spits in the face of God, who challenges nature itself, and is given a punishment that perfectly fits his crime. He wanted to sail forever? He got his wish in the most horrifying way imaginable. His story is a cautionary tale, etched into the very fabric of maritime lore. A reminder that some forces are not meant to be conquered. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the curse isn't the storm or the endless sailing. It's the loneliness. The Dutchman is the ultimate outcast, a specter trapped between the world of the living and the dead. He can see other ships, see the warm lights of ports, but he can never truly connect. He is condemned to an eternity of isolation, a ghost whose only purpose is to be a harbinger of doom for others. This taps into a fundamental human fear, the fear of being utterly, irrevocably alone. And yet, woven into all that darkness is that powerful, persistent glimmer of hope, the story of Senta, of a love so pure and strong that it can break the unbreakable curse, speaks to our deepest desires for redemption. It tells us that no matter how grave the sin, no matter how long the punishment, forgiveness is possible. It suggests that compassion and sacrifice are forces more powerful than any divine curse or raging storm. Today, the Flying Dutchman has sailed out of the realm of terrifying omen and into the port of popular culture. We see its influence in the haunting Davy Jones and his crew in Pirates of the Caribbean. We see a comical version as a recurring gag in SpongeBob SquarePants. The name has been given to everything from roller coasters to sailboats. The ghost ship has become a piece of our shared cultural language. And yet, the sightings haven't entirely stopped. Even in our modern world of steel hulls and advanced navigation, sailors on lonely night watches still report strange phenomena. A ghostly light on the horizon where no ship should be. A vessel appearing on radar, only to vanish moments later. The unmistakable silhouette of an old-fashioned schooner, sailing impossibly fast against a gale-force wind, before disappearing into the mist. Are they tricks of the light? Atmospheric anomalies? Or is the ocean vast and deep and mysterious as ever, simply keeping its oldest secrets? The legend of the Flying Dutchman endures not because we believe a phantom ship is still out there, but because the story itself is eternal. It's a story about defiance, punishment, loneliness, and the redeeming power of love. It's a mirror held up to our own struggles with fate and our own search for a safe harbor. So the next time you stand by the ocean, and you see the fog roll in, listen closely. You might just hear the creak of phantom rigging, and the desperate, lonely cry of a captain, still searching for a shore he can never reach, doomed to sail forever on the unforgiving waves of legend.